Bar has to start at breastbone level with his feet hip-width apart. In the eccentric phase, the primary joint movers are his hips and knees, which are performing flexion on the way down. The primary muscle movers for those joints are the glutes for the hips and the quads for the knees. On the way up, in the concentric phase, he's exhaling on the way up with his joints. The primary joints are his hips and knees, which are performing extension. The primary muscle movers are his glutes and his quads for those joints. Bar has to be on shoulders and his elbows sticking up for start position with his feet hip-width apart. In the eccentric phase, he's inhaling, and the primary joint movers are his hips and knees, which are performing flexion. And the primary muscle movers are his glutes and his quads. In the concentric phase, he's exhaling. The primary joint movers are his knees and hips, which are performing extension, and the primary muscle movers are his glutes and quads. Starting position, sitting on the bench where he's going into concentric phase with his primary joint movers are his hips and his knees, which are performing extension, where the primary muscle movers are his quads and his glutes. In the eccentric phase, he's inhaling as he's lowering, and the primary joint movers are his hips and knees, and the primary muscle movers are his quads and glutes. Starting position is his feet hip-width apart with his shoelace under the bar. As he's lifting in the concentric phase, he's exhaling with his primary joint movers as his hips and knees, which are performing extension. The primary muscle movers for these joints are the glutes for the hips and the quads for the knees. In the eccentric phase, he's inhaling, and as he's going down, and the primary joint movers are his hips and knees, which are performing flexion, and the primary muscle movers are his glutes and quads for these joints. Start, grab the bar, and then perform a flexion in your hip and knees. Place the bar below your chest as you go into concentric phase. You exhale when you lift. The primary joint movers are your elbow, shoulder joint, and shoulder girdle. The actions happening is flexion, extension, and retraction. The primary muscle movers for your elbow is your biceps brachii. For your shoulder joint is your latissimus dorsi. For your shoulder girdle is your rhomboid. In the eccentric phase, the primary joint movers are occurring, but instead they're performing different actions, which are extension for your elbows, flexion for your shoulder joint, and protraction for your shoulder girdle, with the same primary muscle movers.
Starting position, knee should be underneath the hip and hand underneath the shoulder, both parallel on the bench. Leg that is touching the floor should have a slight bend and a neutral back. For the lift phase, joint changing angles are the shoulder girdle, shoulder joint, and elbow joint. The actions occurring are retraction for the shoulder girdle, extension and hyperextension for the shoulder joint, and flexion for the elbow joint. The primary muscle movers are the rhomboids and mid-trapezius, the shoulder girdle, latissimus dorsi for the shoulder joint, and biceps brachii for the elbow joint, and that's the same with the lowering phase. The isotonic contraction is concentric, which is an exhale. On the lowering phase, the same joints are changing angle, but the actions is protraction for shoulder girdle, flexion for shoulder joint, and extension for elbow joint. For the isotonic contraction, it's eccentric with an inhale. For the start position of a pull-up, hands should be in a pronated position, a little bit more than shoulder width apart of separation. A resistance band could be used if needed. The joints changing angles in a lifting phase are shoulder joint, shoulder girdle, and elbow joint, and that's the same for concentric and eccentric phases. The actions occurring are retraction for the shoulder girdle, flexion for the shoulder joint, and flexion for elbow joint. The primary muscle movers are the rhomboids and the mid-lower traps for the girdle, the latissimus dorsi for the shoulder joint, and the triceps brachii for the elbow joint, and that's the same with the lowering phase as well. Isotonic contractions would be concentric, and that would be with exhaling. On the lowering phase, it would be protraction for the shoulder girdle, extension for the shoulder joint, and extension for the elbow joint. The isotonic contraction for the lowering phase would be eccentric while inhaling. The start position for a chin-up is the same as the pull-up, except the hands should be in a supinated position instead of pronated. For the lifting and lowering phases, everything is the same, except for the primary muscle mover. The primary muscle mover is the rhomboids, mid-lower traps for the shoulder girdle, the latissimus dorsi for the shoulder joint, and the biceps brachii for the elbow joint. Everything else is the same. The start position for a barbell bench press. Bar should be eye level, wrist height when arms are extended up, ribs should be tucked, not flared, hands should be a bit wider than shoulder width apart, feet should be flat and hip distance. For the lowering phase, joints changing angles are shoulder joint, shoulder girdle, and elbow joint, and that's the same as the lift as well. Actions occurring are flexion at the shoulder joint, retraction for the shoulder girdle, and flexion at the elbow joint. The primary muscle movers are pectoralis major for the shoulder joint, serratus anterior and pectoralis minor for shoulder girdle, triceps brachii for the elbow, same as the lifting phase as well. The isotonic contraction is eccentric because you inhale when the bar is coming down. On the lifting phase, actions occurring are horizontal adduction at the shoulder joint, protraction at the shoulder girdle, and extension at the elbow joint. Isotonic contraction is concentric and you're exhaling when you're lifting the bar. The start position for a dumbbell bench press is similar to the barbell bench press, except weights are at eye level, not the bar. Remember to form a rainbow in the concentric phase without the weights touching its center. For the lowering phase, joints changing angles are the shoulder joint, shoulder girdle, and elbow joint, same as the lift phase. Actions occurring is horizontal abduction at the shoulder joint, retraction at the shoulder girdle, and flexion at the elbow joint. Primary muscle movers are the pectoralis major at the shoulder joint, serratus anterior and pectoralis minor at the shoulder girdle, and triceps brachii at the elbow joint, and that's the same as the lift phase. The isotonic contraction is eccentric as you inhale whenever you're pulling the weights down. For the lifting phase, actions occurring is horizontal adduction for the shoulder joint, protraction for the shoulder girdle, and extension for the elbow joint. The isotonic contraction is concentric as you exhale when you lift the weights.